Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us. So today I would like to take you on an imaginative adventure through what I'm calling the woke wars. This concept that we might think about as the current version of a long-going culture war politics that has been playing out, now being rebranded through the language of woke. So before we do that, I want to get us thinking about choices. Because I will argue that part of what is at the heart of the woke wars is this question of choices we make, and more importantly, the political implications of these choices. So I've got a couple challenges where I need you to think about. I'm going to give you two options. Which of these two options would you choose? Okay, next. So, Apple or Android? Which do you choose? So a bit of both. All right, are you an edge brownie eater or a center brownie eater? A little bit stronger feelings there. Okay, one more challenge for you next. Wands or lightsabers? I'm feeling the force in this crowd today. So right, these are, we could say, relatively easy challenges. Now I've got a slightly harder challenge for you that gets not quite to the woke politics, but it gets us a bit closer. Next. Are you an over or an under? See, you'll notice the overs were the loudest people in the crowd. And that's a common response anywhere you go. But I'm happy to tell you that the correct answer is unders. Now, you'll be surprised to learn that if you look around, at least 1 in 3 people in this room is an over who will go to your house, if you are an under, and turn your toilet paper around to the right way to make sure that you are, participating in the proper toilet protocol, shall we say. I call these people toilet overlords. You all know them. You may live with some of them. Okay, so we're getting to a little bit more serious political choices here, but still somewhat lighthearted. Okay, next. However, what I want to suggest is that the woke wars, at the heart of these, are equally important and life-impacting choices. What kind of books can we have in our classrooms and in our public libraries? How can you identify, and will that identity be recognized? Do you have basic autonomy over your body and your political decisions? And can the values that you find most deeply held in your personal experience, can you actually express those and share those with others? Or are there limitations and restrictions placed on those? And why do those matter? These political choices are really at the heart of what I'm talking about when I discuss the woke wars. Okay, next. So what do we mean by woke? If you look at a dictionary today, you'll see a definition probably somewhere along these lines, describing woke as an adjective and marking some kind of awareness or concern about issues of racial and social injustice and discrimination. This is sort of let's say, the early version or the original version of what woke meant. So I want to take you through briefly a little bit of a history of how this term has evolved and emerged over time. Next. So scholars suggest that the earliest clear reference we have to the phrase woke in this more political sense from Huddie Ledbetter. We know him as Leadbelly, famous black musician, folk and blues. Right? In 1938, he wrote the song Scottsboro Boys, talking about the 1931 event where 9 young black men were arrested and charged with raping 2 white women on a train in Alabama, led to a long and highly contentious case. In 1938, he wrote this song talking about this experience. And then in 1940, Smithsonian Folkways was doing an interview with him when they were recording some of his songs. And they asked him about how he decided to write the song and the context. And he was talking about some of the people that he had met, lawyers involved in the case, and some of the young men. And, so we're talking about, this is the late 30s, Alabama, Deep South. This is still Jim Crow era. And he says, as you can see this quote here, this idea, particularly if you're a young black man or woman going into the South in the late 30s, this is the Jim Crow era, you need, as he says, stay woke, keep your eyes open. Right? And so this is one of the first times where we see this kind of reference to the idea of staying woke or being woke used in this kind of explicit political and kind of racial sense. Okay, next. Interestingly, when I talk to a lot of younger people today, they point to Erykah Badu and her 2008 album, and particularly this song, Master Teacher, where she uses the phrase, I stay woke, a number of times in the refrain. And they often think that Erykah Badu first coined this term, not realizing that actually it's been in circulation at least since the 1930s. Some people argue even as far back as the 1890s. So we can see over time these terms evolve and transform and take on different meanings. But in that initial 1930 sense, and even here in the late 2008s, it still has this sense of being aware of political injustices and kind of larger social issues. But that term quickly started to evolve by the time we get to the last few years. Next. So this is a good example of how many of you probably think about or associate the term woke and woke politics as the way Florida Governor Ron DeSantis talks about it, that woke is a leftist political agenda. It's about Marxist cultural politics, indoctrination, and, as he says, a war on truth. So this way of thinking about woke has come to be sort of the dominant way that many people understand and interpret what woke means, and also what has led to this negative branding of the term woke. Okay, next. So if we imagine three kind of spheres of society where these culture war politics are playing out, politics, education, and culture. These three together are part of where we're contesting what it means to be citizens in the United States, what are our values as a society, as people living together in community. And in each of these, in politics, our own lived personal politics, as well as politics as expressed through state, federal, government, laws and regulations. That's one sphere where these battles are taking place. The culture war politics is probably the one that many of you are most familiar with. Who's advertising what brands, who is their identity, what kind of politics are being pushed. We saw this play out in Florida with Walt Disney World, and it's played out in many other instances since then. And then most clearly for us here at Denison, is playing out in the realm of education, both in K-12 schools as well as in higher education. And part of what I want us to think about is these three spheres are key parts of what we think of as our national imaginary. This is where we reproduce what we understand as our cultural values. This is where young people, through schools, learn new cultures and become, let's say, enculturated into the values of a society. But these are also the terrains where we struggle to change cultural meanings and cultural values. So these three areas are sort of in this dynamic tug of war in what I'm calling this woke wars. Okay, so why does this matter? Next. For you sitting in the audience, those of you that might be watching at home, why should you care about this, or how do these issues potentially impact you? Let me give you a couple examples. Next. Okay, so if we think about here in Ohio, those of you that may have been following local politics, last couple of years there's been an ongoing battle in the Ohio State House to pass a different series of legislative bills, both in the Ohio House and the Senate, which would ban the teaching of divisive concepts and limit, for example, the use of diversity, equity, and inclusion frameworks in jobs, in classroom educations, in professional trainings, would limit the kind of curricular content, topics, even books that we can access, teach with our students, or that you as students could potentially learn about, and imposes all kind of what I would argue are arbitrary political standards under the name of promoting free and open discourse and dialogue. And as we can see here from Representative Williams, one of the co-sponsors of one of these bills that's been going back and forth the last couple of years in the State House, he and other political sort of members of the Ohio Republican Party see this as a culture war to defend public schools, K through 12, as well as colleges, from what they see as this kind of woke indoctrination. People saying we need to talk about race, we need to talk about class, we need to talk about gender, we need to think about issues of power and justice. Politicians like Williams and others want to keep those things out of the classroom and want to restrict what we can talk about and what we can discuss. So this is one example. This specific bill has been sort of fought by educators and the public twice, and so far successfully beat both efforts, but will likely come up again this year. But this is just one of a couple examples, so let's consider our next one here. Just this past month, those of you that have been following Ohio politics will know there's been a contentious debate about transgender students in sports, access to bathrooms, access to all kinds of healthcare and related rights and services. And so just this past month, we saw Ohio Governor DeWine veto a bill that would have restricted transgender students from playing in sports, transgender individuals from getting gender-affirming healthcare, hormone replacement therapy, and others. And in his vote, Representative Click, when he was explaining why he voted to override Governor DeWine's veto, he says here that gender-affirming care is a harmful, superstitious slogan, not evidence-based science. And then he goes on to explain that this wasn't God's plan for people to be transgender. So in all of these situations, in education, in healthcare, in our basic fundamental rights as citizens of Ohio, citizens of a country, human beings, there's this culture war, tug of war, about who gets to say who you can be, how you live your life, what kind of things you can learn about, study, care about. And at the heart of these woke wars is this battle over who will make these decisions, and also, how do those decisions impact our lives? And so my plea to you is that even if you don't find the term woke appealing, or you're not sure if woke is a good thing, or maybe you're worried it's a performative kind of politics, what's at stake, regardless of whether you like the term or identify with the idea of woke, are these deeper questions, issues of justice. So why should we care about these next? A few different reasons. These are at the heart of many of these debates. It's about our basic civil rights. Can we still have them? Are we losing them? And what does the future look like if a certain version of these woke war politics continues to play out? How is that impacting things like free speech? Hopefully many of us care about issues of free speech. At least at a university like this, we talk a lot about the importance of free speech and civic discourse. Public education more broadly. These laws and policies will have an impact on Ohio education and are playing out across many states in the US as well as in other countries as well. If you care about issues of social or racial justice, the woke wars gets to the heart of these debates. Issues of elections, who has the right to vote and who doesn't, who makes those decisions. These are all tangled up in these same kind of debates. And ultimately, they get to this question of democracy. And what does it mean to think about the United States? Are we a diverse, inclusive, multiracial, multi-ethnic, pluralistic democracy? Or are we something else? That vision of the future is being played out right now in what I'm describing as the woke wars. So I'll leave you with this final thought from someone here at Denison University next. Our president here, Adam Weinberg. One of the things we've been doing here at Denison is called Denison Forward. It's a multi-year effort to try to think about how do we put diversity, equity, inclusion, and anti-racism into practice throughout all of the parts of the university. And he said this in one of the statements that came out as part of Denison Forward. Society changes when we, individuals, think and act differently. And so at the heart of these woke wars, is how we think and how we act. And my call for you is to stand up for these values that you think are important, particularly if you think things like racial justice, inclusion, diversity are positive values, then stand up and make that clear, because this is a battle for the hearts and souls of not just the American public, but people around the world. Thank you.